Okay, so something you might be wondering about is what happens if you run out of thread during the sewing process. Like I said in the beginning of sewing, we're starting with just 2 arms lengths of thread or a wingspan of thread, and that was enough for me to finish sewing this book. But if my book was any longer than this or any larger, I probably would have run out of thread. And sometimes we might be sewing books that are so thick, like what if I had 10 signatures? Like, to account for having enough thread at the start would mean that we're sewing with this very, very long length of thread that would be very difficult to handle, and it would probably get tangled and it would be very frustrating. So we want to start with a manageable length of thread. But then when we run out of thread, there's also a special way to attach a new piece that will make sure that the new piece is secure and it won't come undone. And to do that, we make a weaver's knot. So I'm going to demonstrate this with 2 different colors of thread so that it's easier to see what's going on. So let's say that this light green piece is the thread that I've been sewing with. So one end of this, imagine, is attached to my book. And this red piece is the new thread that I'm putting on. So in my new thread, I'm going to tie a slip knot. And this is a knot that is going to be adjustable, kind of like a lasso. So I start by just making a little loop where my 2 ends are crossing, and then I'm going to start to pull the thread through as if I were just tying a regular old knot. But instead of pulling it all the way through, I'm just going to bring like a loop through. And I have my 2 ends of the thread hanging through this lasso part here. And so I'm going to just tighten this until it's pretty small. So I'm making that kind of round circle part of the knot smaller, as well as the loop part that's coming through. And so something about that. So I'm going to take the end of my sewing thread and put that through this part of the loop. And now I'm going to take one end of my new thread and pull that with the end of my old thread. And then I'm going to take the other end of the new thread in my other hand, and I'm just going to pull those together until they tighten. And sometimes you can even feel a click in the tension of the thread. And that is the feeling of these threads interlocking. And if you look closely here, you can see this interlocking that has happened where the green thread is being pulled into that loop and locked around the red thread. So this is just making a very strong knot. And so now if I pull my red thread against my green thread, it stays really well. It's very tight and very secure. Sometimes it takes a few tries to get this right. So if you pull it and it slides off, the interlocking action didn't happen correctly and you just need to try it again. Sometimes it takes several tries to get it right. But this will ensure a nice secure knot. And then you can just trim all of the extra threads. You can cut them like fairly close. And then you would continue sewing with your new length of thread. For a Coptic bound book, I recommend doing this on the inside of the book because, of course, if you were doing it on the outside, it would show on your spine. So I would recommend, if you have to join a new thread, that you do it on the inside of a signature, and probably one of the more central sewing stations would be best.